Good morning, everyone, and welcome to our Sparking Logic webinar series. Today, our topic is going to be lifecycle management. I'm Caroline Berlioz-Matignon, and with me today, I have Colin McClintock. Before I get started, I would like to give you some directions on how to use our webinar technology. During the webinar, all of your lines will be muted and we will be taking questions through the chat window. So please, if you have questions at any point in time, you can type them into the chat window and we will cover them at the end of the presentation during our Q&A session. If you would prefer your question to be answered privately, please just let us know and we will answer by email after the presentation. The presentation is being recorded and will be available after the recording is done, after the presentation. And finally, we recommend that you expand your view. So if you mouse over, you will see that there is an icon with 4 arrows going in all directions of a square. This will maximize your view and will be helpful during the demonstration. So with that, let me get started. In terms of introductions, I'm Caroline Berlioz-Matignon, one of the co-founders of the company and the Chief Product Officer. And Colleen, would you like to say a word of introduction?
Good morning, everyone. I'm Colleen McClintock, and I'm Vice President of Products for Sparking Logic.
Thank you. So before getting into the core of our topic for the day, I would like to say just a few words about Sparking Logic for those of you that may not know the company very well. We are fully dedicated to prescriptive analytics and decision management. Although the company has been created only 5 years ago, we've been in that space for 20, 30 years, each of us in the company. We are based in the Silicon Valley, and the reason we created this company was really to come up with new ideas and new ways of addressing decision management and this whole world of business rules. So we do have some patented innovations and really creative ways to address the challenges. And this is why we have been recognized as being a core vendor by Gartner, and we're very proud of that. So let me get started on our topic of lifecycle management. Obviously, if you have more questions about the company, we'll be happy to engage one-on-one and to have follow-up conversations. But for our presentation today, I would like to really focus on lifecycle management, which is the ability to track changes and promote new version of your business rules through the different staging environments. So it really goes from the ideation of your business rules, if you will, all the way to the release into production. The traditional software development lifecycle, SDLC, there is a very formal process. Whether you use an agile methodology or waterfall approach, SDLC really takes time and energy because usually these systems that you're building or that your IT organization is building are significant efforts. And that requires a lot of work to design, to implement, to test, to deploy all of these different capabilities as part of your system. And what is really new and different decision management is that we can make this whole process very simple. You just have to make changes into your user interface in the authoring environment, save the changes, and then they can be deployed automatically on the fly within the decision service. And your systems will be able to invoke these business rules as soon as they are being deployed. So the whole effort of designing, testing, or implementing first testing is something that you do as part of your authoring work, and that's really the reason that business rules exist in the first place is to extract them from the code so that you can change them very quickly, very rapidly, at a different pace than your typical software development lifecycle. That being said, it doesn't that you have to do everything on the fly, foregoing completely governance and testing. Obviously, we see all the different practitioners, all the different customers of these kind of technologies really taking seriously lifecycle management. So, so as part of this presentation, what I would like to do is really go through some best practices, some challenges that we see in the industry around lifecycle management, and see all the different ways that you do not have to give up on governance, that you do not have to give up on testing. So let's start with the first challenge associated with decision management and more specifically the life cycle, the fact that we are going to change these business rules. This first challenge is about transparency. So how do you know what changes were made as part of your systems? The reason that you really need to know that it is a challenge or it is an objective for the rules writers to know where the changes are is very similar to the software development lifecycle, actually. The same way that you will be tracking all the changes that developers do on the software code, you do want to know who is the last person who made the change to the business rules. So you want to have this level of accountability so that you can pinpoint or you can have a conversation with the person that made the change so that you can better understand the reason. You can discuss some ideas on other things that you may want to change. But you have this transparency as to who made that change and when did they make the change. So we can capture that. The other aspect is also history, being able to know what the rule used to be before it became what it is currently. So those are very similar objectives than you would have, than an IT person will have when they are writing the code, than the business person will have when they are writing business rules. But quite the same thing in the terms that or in the way that you would want to achieve this objective. So while an IT person, an engineer will be very comfortable going into a source code management system, and whether he or she is using command line or using a tool to be able to see and to update the source code on his or her machine, a business person is not going to do that most likely. So you really want to bring all of these capabilities in a way that's very simplistic for a business person to be able to engage with them. So let me take just a quick break so that I can show you, as part of our smart decision management system, what that means to be able to track these business rules and how we think that business analysts or business users can be very comfortable doing so. So let's switch. Just for those of you that have not used the product or have not seen a demonstration, I do encourage you to join one of our product tours that we are running every other week so that we can give you a full tour of the product. But I'm going to be focusing mostly on the capabilities related to lifecycle management today. So I just connected to Smart in our on the cloud. Let me just bring in the address bar so that I can make it disappear. There you go. I'm actually running in IE as a browser, accessing Smart on the cloud. So doing so, when I connect, I do get access to all of the projects that are available to me. So let's say I'm interested in this AutoQuote project. I can jump into the project and then jump in one of the decisions. Let's say I'm interested in the state of California. So I jump in and look at all the business rules that are available for this decision. Unlike other approaches, the way we like to do it in Smart is not showing you only the business rules, but providing you with a lot of context about these business rules. So just as a little bit of orientation, on the left side of the screen, we can see some transactions, and I can see what is the input to the rules, and then I will see the effect of the business rules on these transactions. So let's go back to the first document, which is Joe. On the right side, I do have a dashboard that shows me some of the distribution reports for input or output values or any calculation of interest. And on the bottom side, I do have my decision pane that includes all of the business rules. So let me expand here business rules so that you can see a few examples of these business rules. So for each one of these rules, when I click on the little clock icon, I will be able to see what are all the different versions of the rules that exist into the system. And you can see that this rule here has only one version. But if I was to select another rule, let me go to a rule that I know has multiple iterations of it. I'm going to search for my high risk rule. If you've seen one of our presentations, you will know which rule this is about. So here for my high risk rule, I can see that I do have up to 4 versions of this rule that has been created. And we believe it's really important to keep track of the version of the rules individually instead of looking at them collectively, because you do not want to just look at the history of an entire rule set. If your rule set contains 2 or 3 rules or even 10 rules, it may not be so bad, but we have seen rule sets that contain hundreds of rules and even some that contain thousands of rules. So you don't want to have this gigantic blob containing all of the changes for all of the rules, which might be really difficult to find. So we highly recommend that you do this versioning at the rule level. And that allows you to see that I made this change actually this morning, and I can compare with the past version. So I could look at version 3 and what is the difference between version 2 and version 3. I can simply click on the icon, and it shows me that I changed the name. It used to be called high risk 3 max accident, and I changed it to 2 plus max accident. And I changed also the condition, where it used to be for average age less than 25, and I changed it into less than 23 instead. So this allows me to very quickly understand where this rule comes from and what were the iteration and the latest changes that were associated with the rule. Going back to the reasons I would want to see the versioning, one thing that happens in projects is that everybody does not always work in the same room or in the same office. So if you have people that are geographically dispersed, working from different locations, possibly different countries, different time zones, or if some of your team members are going on vacation, which I hope they do, and when they come back, they may want to see what actually happened on the project that we're working on. So you can always go back to your notifications area, which is like an activity stream, and you can see all the different changes over time. So you can see here, Caroline, which is me, made some changes to the airline project, or created some to-dos for the airline project. And then I created a release, and I'll talk a little bit later about that for this auto quote project. And then I saved some other items. So you can go back in time, like you would go into Facebook and see what your friends were up to. You can go on the activity stream and see what your team members were up to. And all of these are really helpful tools to help you see the day-to-day changes to your project as you're working on authoring this business rule and working, collaborating as a team. So let's go back to the presentation for some more challenges that we see being important as it relates to lifecycle management. The second challenge is about publication. It's about the actual move, physical move of the rules going from development to testing to production. How do you push these rules, and why is that an important aspect? So obviously, the reason you need that is the same as the software development lifecycle. And I promise I'm not gonna say it's the same as software development lifecycle for every challenge. I think those are the only two. But definitely you do want to isolate your different environments. And in some cases you have to. There might be some corporate mandates that your production system is fully isolated from your intranet. So publication, this process of publication is how you're going to move your projects from development to testing and testing to production. And then from there, eventually you will be able to deploy. The way we recommend doing that, or that we see being successful, is to separate this publication capability at the top level as a two-step process. One, which is the actual publish operation, which is what business users want to initiate. They do want to say, I'm ready. I think I've done all the changes. I've tested all the changes I wanted into my business rules. I'm ready to push them into the test area so that we can go through maybe more automated testing, or as a QA team go through some more testing. So this publish operation going from development to testing is something that is user initiated, but the physical move from the development repository to the testing repository is something that you do not want to configure by hand every time you're going to publish. In that case, it's a very simple move from development to testing and testing to production. But if you're talking about a large application, you might have production servers in more than one location. So if you have, let's say, 10 different production servers around the globe, do you want to rely on a user to say, I'm going to deploy to production 1, to production 2, to production 3, to production 4, and so on? Obviously, you don't want to do that. You do want to say, I'm ready to push into production, and then to have the replication just figure out what's the actual destination of this production workspace. And hopefully you're familiar with the terminology of workspaces and repositories, but the workspaces will be just a segment of this repository where we do have isolation from workspace to workspace. And the way to move your business rules from one to the other will be through this publication operation. So I'm not necessarily, let me just show you very briefly what kind of operation is needed, but I'm not going to demonstrate the publication because it will require connecting and disconnecting from different workspaces. And just for the sake of time, I'm not going to do that. But I'll show you some of our publication operations where you may want to publish a project. So you will select your patient therapy project, for example. And then you can provide some information, some description of your publication operation. You could publish into a brand new workspace, or you could select an existing workspace. Let's say it will be my default workspace. And I could use a filtering view. And I just want to say a word about that because that really allows you, these filtering views allow you to do incremental publications. So if you want to publish only the set of 10 rules that have been validated and approved, by setting up these views, which are really filters, you're able to say only these 10 will migrate into my next environment. So that's one approach you can use. What we've seen also is quite often is migrating the entire project at once because it has been tested and it's part of a phase of your modification. And of course, you can tag your items as you publish them so that you can keep track of which publication, operation, or package they were part of. So back to the question, because although this publication is very effective when you want to push your rules into all of your production systems, sometimes you may not want to push these rules and impose your new version of the rules to all of your production systems. You may want your production system to pull them and to decide when they will be ready to bring these new updates into your system. So the way we see it working, or some cases where we see that maybe if you have a customer workspace and you want from the customer workspace to be able to pull your projects from a master library of projects and not start your project from scratch. But if you have multiple customers and each one of them has a slightly different flavor of your implementation, or if you have different geographies where you will have a slightly different flavor of it, you can just maintain the master version of your rules into this master library and have each one of these customers or each one of these segments be in control as to when we will bring these business rules into their environment. So technically it works the same as the publication, but just from the destination instead of originating from the source. So why do you need that? Typically, it might be because you have a disconnected environment. Your customer configurations may not be local. They might be at the customer side, and you may not use the actual publication using replication, but you might use the file archive to move the project into your customer location. It might be also the same with different geographies. Maybe they have some boundaries where you cannot move, you cannot push these business rules, these projects into their environment. Another reason that you might need capabilities to import, to pull into your destination might be for elective upgrades or timed upgrades. So even though you might have 10 different production servers, all of them may not be ready to be upgraded at the same time. You may want to upgrade one country, let it go for a week or two, and then upgrade another country. So if you want to have the control as to when these projects will be updated, this is when you would use the import mechanism instead. So for this challenge, just want to show you briefly the way the import mechanism works will be very similar. Obviously, you don't have to configure which one is your target environment because you will be launching this operation from your target workspace. But here I define that my demo workspace was actually a library, a master library. So I can just pick any of the projects. And again, using filtering, using tagging if I want to, I can bring these projects into my environment. It's a nice way to subscribe, if you will, to the evolution of these projects. And it's not a one-time thing. You can obviously keep refreshing this implementation when you are ready. So instead of version 1, it will be version 2, which is not part of the name. It's just an indicator so that you know how many iterations, which one is the iteration that you're bringing into your environment. Another challenge that we hear about quite a lot is about disaster recovery. And while you keep pushing your rules into production, sometimes you may want to roll back. You want to return to the previous configuration that was. And why would you need to do that? Because mistakes happen. Einstein said a person who never made a mistake never tried anything new. Obviously, you do want to try things new, and sometimes it doesn't go as planned. business rules are really good at allowing you to do a lot of testing, a lot of simulation before things move into production. But there might be some technical problem with the overall system if you're relying on data that has not been upgraded through the software development lifecycle. Then your business rule is going to be missing something and you cannot operate properly. Or if you missed some key performance indicator, you didn't track some important metrics, and once these business rules get into production, they do not perform in the business sense as you expected. So this might be a reason for you to say, okay, let's go back to the previous version. It's not always for a negative reason that you may want to roll back. You may want to just go back in time and see, well, which rules were actually in effect last week, and being able to maybe diagnose why a transaction was processed one way versus another. So that might be a reason to go back in time and to try to see what was the version at that time. What you do not want to do is probably, especially if you're in crisis mode, is to call your IT organization and say, something is going wrong. I need to upgrade, or I need to downgrade, actually. You don't want them to have to scramble and find the backup tapes from last week to be able to resurrect that version of the business rules. And if you're using versioning, you don't want to go back to each one of the rules that you created and just revert to the previous version of these rules. I mean, it could be very tedious and it's definitely error prone. What you want to do is to have a very simple mechanism to be able to keep track of all of these different versions. So let me go into this capability. And okay, I'm getting some updates that the screen sharing paused for a second, but hopefully now it's working fine. So let me go back to my project. In my project, so I have a number of decisions, and I do have this ability to create releases, and I can see that I currently have 3 different releases that were created over time. So what I can do is to go back to any release. So for example, if the current release is release 3, obviously, I could go back to release 2 and take a look at what was the actual configuration at the time. So by clicking a release, I'm allowing Smart to display the current state of that release. So when I open my business rules, and let me go into this California set of rules, and I'm going to expand so that we can focus on the business rules. It will show me what was the configuration at the time that release 2 was active. So it's just going to take a minute to download the whole configuration, the whole project into the environment. And so one of the rules that we changed was this rule about high risk with two or more accidents. So I think my network is running slow with a webinar running at the same time as Smart. But it should be the project very shortly. There you go. So let me search again my high risk rule for 2+ accidents. So you can see it's right here. Let me filter so that we're not being distracted by the other rules. There we go. So you can see that the current version here Oh, actually, at the time was already with the average age being less than 23. So that was the version 2. And you can see that here for each one of the version, it will tell you which one is, which release, which version is participate in which one of the releases. But if I go back and say now we'll look at release 1 instead, I can go back in time, see what is the configuration um, at the time that release 1 was out in production. So I'm going to open this California again and expand my decisions area. And as soon as it loads, we'll be able to go back in time and look at our rule for 2+ accidents. Although it sounds like it's a simple exercise to go back in time, it's actually not so trivial to do that by hand. If you do not have a tool that will allow you to keep track of all the different versions of each one of the business rules, we've seen over time that people were just creating archives of the projects that they saved in the source code management system, so that they will have all these different versions available to retrieve. So it does require quite a bit of discipline to be able to keep track of all of these configurations if the tool doesn't do it for you. So let me go back to my version, to my rule 2+, and filter based on that rule, or based on that search. Oh, at the time it was not called 2+, it was called 3, because I changed the name eventually. So you can see that this rule at that point in time was actually less than 25 and it had a different name. So you can go back, you can take your data, so we can load our renewal sample of transactions, and I will be able to re-execute these transactions based on the rules that were active at the time of release 1. So this is a very useful capability to be able to diagnose what happened with the rules, or to be able to go back in time. So technically what I would do if I just wanted to go back in time would be to go into, I need to go into my releases, not the decisions, is to decide, well, currently release 3 is my project default. So when I clicked on it, it turned a little star on saying this is my project default. So any invocation against my project will go against release 3 and not the few manual changes I might have done and not any past releases. But if I wanted to change that and say, oh, there was a problem with release 3, I need to go back to release 2, then I could just click on it and make it my project default. And now all the transactions will be routed to release 2 instead. So it doesn't require a lot of IT involvement, doesn't require to retrieve some backup tapes. It doesn't require to go back and check each one of the rules manually. It just takes a click on the start to make it the project default. And then the transactions will be routed to the right release of the project. And now, challenge in this presentation is about experimentation. So even though it's really easy to change from one release to the next, so now release 4 is available, I want to make it my default. There are some times where you may want to run different versions or different releases, will be probably a better term, of your decision service at the same time. And I know this is something I've seen and that has been requested for many, many years, to be able to have different versions. And you might wonder, why would I want, if I have new rules, they're probably better than the old rules. Why would I want to run different versions of them? One reason that you may need this capability is if you're doing A/B testing or champion challenger. If you're directing your traffic or your transactions to one version of your rules versus the other version of the rules, you may want to create two different releases and then have all of these routing being done automatically by Smart using our champion challenger capability. Sometimes champion challenger is about two completely different branches of your business rules. Might be two different models that you are using or two different sets of business rules that you will be using. But sometimes it's the new iteration versus the last iteration. So if those are actually releases that are incrementally better, I guess, or that keep evolving, then you can compare release versus release. And that's a use case that we see quite a bit. The other is a progressive rollout. If you want to crawl, walk, run with your new set of business rules, you may want to use actually the same technique of champion challenger, but not necessarily to compare how well they perform or which one is delivering the best business value. But if you just want to upgrade only a portion of your transactions, let's do it one state at a time, or let's do it for 10% of your transactions first. Then if that works well, you can upgrade to 50%. And if everything goes well, then it could be 100%. I see IT organizations wanting to do things like that because even though the business rules might be correct and everything, IT always wants to make sure that they will perform from a runtime perspective. And because there are some very strict SLAs in some cases where you really want to make sure that they will perform fast and that business users, even though they are saying the right thing, they're writing the rules the right that reflects what they want from a business perspective, they are not developers. They may not optimize the rules the same way that an IT person will do. So we see sometimes some resistance from IT organizations that are responsible for these SLAs wanting to roll out the new version of the rules more progressively. And you can make them project default and you can do all of that. You can always also decide from an API perspective which one is the release that you want to use. Even though release 2 is the project default, you could have a champion challenger strategy that will do a 5% going to release 3 and the other 95% going to release 2. Or you could have your own software code being responsible and being deciding which one of the releases they would want to invoke, and that will be part of the signature of the APIs. So that covers all the materials that I had prepared. So we do have sometimes a little bit of time for question and answers. So as a reminder, for our Q&A session, you're welcome to just type in your questions in the chat window, and then we will cover the questions verbally. Or if you would like your questions to be answered privately, we will answer your questions by email. So I'm going to give you a minute to come up with your questions. And we have a first question, which is, I'm just going to read it. What are the best practices that you recommend for publication? That's an open-ended question, so thank you for asking it. I'm going to just simplify that by looking at two different ways that you can do publication. I think that the two different scenario that we see the most often will be to either do an incremental publication or a full publication for the entire project. And it really depends on the DNA of the company. And mostly IT will have a say in that setup for the lifecycle management process as part of the environment. But I've seen a lot of companies that are actually managing the rules really individually, and they do have spreadsheets that they use um, across the team so that managers will be able to review it, even on a mobile device, just review the rules that are candidates will review the reports after the simulation, and then they will approve them. And then if you have your set of 10 rules that have been approved, then you just want to push these 10 rules. So you will use tags or something like that to identify the 10 rules that you want to push into the next staging environment. And you will apply that as the filtering view, as we saw in the publication pane or the library import, whichever mechanism you are using. Typically, IT is not too keen on this mechanism. If they have a say, most likely they would want the entire project to be tested and pushed into production. So it's hard to tell, as an absolute answer, which one is the best. I think both of them are valid. It really depends on your requirements and the way you're managing these environments. So hopefully that answers your question. The next question is, do you integrate with CI tools for automating these tasks? And I suppose that CI tools will be for continuous integration tools. And yes, we do integrate. This is actually something that very often initiated by the IT organization. There is a desire to automate some of the operations. They might be related to lifecycle management. They might be related to administration. They might be related to machine learning. But we do have, and let me just show you briefly a little. We have here a task flow editor that will allow you to define those tasks that you want to sequence here by saying first I want to import data and I want to then run a job and I want to do a simulation and then I will email that to the manager. So all of these little processes can be configured into Smart, and then it could be invoked through API from a Maven process, for example. So that's something that could be externalized and exposed through APIs to these continuous integration tools. We have another question about versioning. Can conflicts happen? And how are they resolved? Yes, conflicts can happen. Obviously, there could be different people working on the same role at the same time. And the way in our environment we manage versioning is by allowing everybody to make changes to the business rules as they are authoring them. So there are two approaches. You can be optimistic or pessimistic. If you're pessimistic, you think that a lot of conflicts will happen. And in that case, you will require that somebody locks the rule and eventually makes the change. He or she would be the only person to make the change, and then they can save it. Or you can be optimistic and say most of the time everybody will be in charge of a portion of the rules, or their change will I'm sorry, will be specific to one business rule at a time or just a couple. So the likelihood that two people are going to change the same rule is probably not very high. And that is actually the approach that we have taken in our product, to be optimistic, because um, with a pessimistic approach, what we saw was that people were too greedy. They wanted to lock everything and make sure I'm the only one that can make changes to anything in the business world, because I don't want to wait for someone else to release the lock if I absolutely need to make a change. And that doesn't work, because you want to work as a collaboration. You don't want just one person being allowed to make changes to the overall system. So if you don't have a very strong discipline about only locking when you need it, abuse typically happens. And that's when the administrator needs to jump in and just release the lock, because it's not conducive to having a true collaboration. So that is why we decided to be optimistic and to let you make changes. But if a change was to happen, first of all, you will receive a notification to know as you are working that somebody else made a change to that business rule. You will have a little sunflower decoration instead of the hour clock for the versioning. So you will see that there is something likely to result in a conflict even before you make the change, and you can bring these updates from the other person into your environment before you make the change, so that they can be cumulative. If change does happen, there's always a chance that two people are going to make a change at the same time, exact same time. So you may not have received the sunflower, or you may not have paid attention to the sunflower. And if that happens, when you try to save your new version of the rule, the save operation will warn you and will ask you to decide what is your resolution strategy. So you can decide to actually give up and let the other person win, or you may want to override what the other person did. And obviously, nothing will be lost, because it will still be available in the history, but it will be just a past version instead of the current version. Or you can decide for status quo. And status quo means I will keep the other version in the repository, but I'm going to keep my version in my workspace, and I can go and talk to this person, or we can find a way to resolve the conflict in a way that is not automated. But in our experience, these conflicts have not happened in very large number. So typically, the optimistic approach is quite effective. A lot of the projects have thousands of rules or tens of thousands of rules, so the likelihood that two people are changing the same thing is still very low. So that covers the questions that have been posted. If you do have more questions, we encourage you to contact us. We'll be happy to do a presentation one-on-one, or to answer your questions by email after this webinar. And I would like to thank you for joining us today. I hope this was informative and that you learned something about lifecycle management, and some of the challenges related to lifecycle management in around business rules. And I would like to ask you to just stay on the line for another minute or so. And as we end the webinar, you will be sent to a survey. So we do take these surveys very seriously. So please take a few seconds to answer the survey and let us know how well we did, and whether there are some other topics that will be of interest to you. So thank you, everyone, and have a wonderful day.